How much better will the Buffalo Bills defense be in 2025? We're exploring that today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, welcome in. Yesterday, we went through each offensive position, and we asked the question, is it better? Are the players this year better than the players last year? And there wasn't much turnover year over year with the offensive side of the football. Defensively, that's not the case. There's a lot of new players. And I'm excited to really just consider where this depth chart is now, compare it to last year, and simply ask the question, is it better, and how can it be better? So we'll go defense today here on this episode. We'll actually get to the specialists as well at the very end. But let's start with the front. Let's start at defensive tackle, where for a consecutive season, there's a lot of turnover. Your returning players, though, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, and Dwayne Carter entering his second season. Gone, Austin Johnson, Jordan Phillips, and Quentin Jefferson. Three north of 30 players, north of 30-year-old players. Gone and replaced with some youth, right? A couple of draft picks in TJ Sanders and Deion Walker, a second and a fourth round pick, in addition to Larry Ogunjobi, who's 31 years old. But it's the only old player that was added, right? Two rookies to kind of offset that. Is it better? Boy, I hope it's better. I certainly do. Now, we don't have any proof of concept of TJ Sanders or Deion Walker. But I like Larry Ogunjobi better than Austin Johnson. And I'd like to think that a couple of young players in Sanders and Walker can provide more than a couple of street free agents signed late in the season to help round out a defensive tackle rotation in Phillips and Jefferson. So I certainly hope it's better, although we don't really know what Sanders and Walker are going to be, especially in year one. So how can it be better? Well, it starts with the upside from the rookies. What does this team get from Sanders and Walker this year? What do they get from Dwayne Carter in year two as he takes a step, hopefully? Another player that had an injury middle of the season, came back, and really wasn't involved once he came back. Third-round pick in 2024. Needs to become a meaningful part of this rotation. But I think your best pathway for better play, better impact from the defensive tackles is really the young guys. Sanders, Walker, Carter. Those guys developing and making an impact. Now, there's other things, and I think those other things start with consistency from Ed Oliver. Can we get the player we saw from the Detroit game on? Can we get to see the player we saw in 2023? Right? If Ed could be a little more consistent and a little bit more impactful, that would go a long way. He's a good player. Just want to see him show up a little bit more. And then the other question is about Daquan Jones. I don't think last year was his most impactful season, especially based on the moments he had in 2023. Aging player, expiring deal. It's hard to envision him suddenly being something completely different, but can he make more of an impact this year? I hope so. That's the thing I feel least certain about. Again, I think he could be a serviceable starter, yes, but the impact might be modest. We'll see. Hopefully he can get back on track after a so-so 2024 campaign. So I hope this group is better. It's all about the young guys, consistency from Ed Oliver, and maximizing what's left from Daquan Jones. Let's get to defensive end. Returning players, Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Javon Solomon. Your departing players, DeJuan Smoot, who signed a one-year deal with Jacksonville. We don't have the terms on that, but I would assume it's a minimum deal. And Von Miller. Von Miller's not been signed by any team yet, in addition to Austin Johnson, Jordan Phillips, Quentin Jefferson. So 4 departing players that had roles for this defense last year. It's middle of June, and those guys don't have teams. Kind of interesting, right? Players brought in: Joey Bosa, Michael Hoyt, and third-round pick Landon Jackson. Is it better? Yes. On paper, this is a better defensive end group. Joey Bosa, at this point in his career, more impactful of a player than Von Miller pretty comfortably. Michael Hoyt's a better player than DeJuan Smoot. And now you add Landon Jackson. It's a better group. And it needed to be, right? So we know that it's a better group, but in what ways can it be better? And I do think it is, like I said, Joey Bosa and the impact that he's capable of making. Michael Hoyt, once he gets back from suspension and kind of being an X factor for this defense. And then Landon Jackson, who got lost in the sauce, if you will, in a very good defensive end group in this past draft, and the Bills got him much later than I think he should have been available. You've got a vet in Bosa, you got a younger vet in Hoyt, and you got a rookie in Landon Jackson. Talk about infusing your depth chart with some meaningful assets. You certainly did that. So the path to improvement really is rooted in those 3 players, but I also look at Javon Solomon as a player from last year's draft class that didn't get a ton of opportunity, but certainly had his flashes when he was on the field. His pass rush metrics are actually quite good when he was on the field. How does he fit into this mix? And I think with Michael Hoyt missing time to start the year, Javon Solomon could be in line for a few snaps. And if he makes it happen, he's going to get more opportunity. And then I'll also shout out Greg Rousseau here, where he's still a young player, 25 years old, only came into the league with 400-something snaps of playing defensive line under his belt in college, right? A guy that didn't have a ton of experience coming into the league. Now, of course, he's played 4 seasons. It's not like he's a brand new player, but last year he matched a career high with 8 sacks. He set new career highs in tackles for loss, quarterback pressures, quarterback hits, and forced fumbles. Am I supposed to assume that his age 24 season was the best he'll ever be? I'm excited to see where it goes for Greg Rousseau, especially if things are better around him. So we knew this defensive line needed to be better, needed to make more of an impact. And after signing Bosa and Ogunjobi and Hoyt and drafting TJ Sanders, Deion Walker, and Landon Jackson, boy, you better believe I hope this is finally the mix where we're like, yeah, they got it right. They got the right mix up front, and this defense is going to be the best version of itself because of it. So there's a lot riding on these investments, but you feel good about what the Bills have done here to infuse this group with veterans and young talent. All right, coming up on the other side of it, I want to talk linebackers and cornerbacks. So, folks, be sure to stick with me. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live, and this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app, they actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and with last-minute deals, killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. I love that I can see my exact view before I buy. No surprises when I get to the venue. And look, Game Time makes scoring NFL tickets just as easy. And with the Game Time guarantee, your tickets are 100% authentic, will arrive on time, and you always get the best price with fees included. So what you see is what you pay. If you've never used Game Time to grab NFL seats, now is the time. It's seriously a game day upgrade. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's talk linebackers and cornerbacks. And linebacker is a position group where the Bills hadn't made a move until just a few days ago when they signed Shaq Thompson. So when you talk about the returning players at linebacker, well, it's the same ones they had last year. Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano, Dorian Williams, Joe Andreessen, Edifwan Ulofoshio, and Balin Spector. The same guys, none left, no departing players, and your new addition, Shaq Thompson. Talked about Shaq Thompson last week on the podcast. First-round pick of the Carolina Panthers back in 2015. Bean was part of that front office. Sean McDermott was the defensive coordinator, keeping in mind they had Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis already at linebacker, and they drafted Shaq Thompson, who's now 31 years old. And the last 2 years, he's had significant season-ending injuries. 2 years ago, it was a broken fibula. Last year, it was a ruptured Achilles. So wrong side of 30, back-to-back season-ending injuries. But I can tell you that in the 8 years that Shaq Thompson was healthy for Carolina, he was a good starting linebacker in the NFL that can play both spots, the weak side spot and the Mike linebacker spot, and certainly has experience with Sean McDermott. So he comes in with familiarity in the scheme. It's hard to know what to expect from him, right? Given just the opportunity that does and does not exist in Buffalo, and just where Shaq is at 31 and the back-to-back injuries. So is this group better? Yes, of course it is. It's the same players plus Shaq Thompson. That's better. And obviously there's a world where Shaq Thompson might not even make this team. And so if it's just the exact same players, how can it be better? Well, I think it starts with a healthy Matt Milano. Finally healthy. And hopefully that doesn't change, right? Kind of hold your breath with that guy, but he's healthy, and boy, does he have a lot of incentive to have a great season. Kind of talked about this yesterday with James Cook, and Matt Milano reworked his deal. He took a pay cut, has the opportunity to earn that back through incentives, but the real reason why Matt would want to take the pay cut is it gets him to free agency a year earlier. So now his contract is expired after this season as opposed to after 2026. And that'll put Matt Milano in position to get, if he's healthy and he's Matt Milano, get a nice contract. So a big time bet on himself here. And he's healthy. And look, I think we've had a lot of excitement for the possibility of what Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano can be playing next to each other. We haven't really seen it for an extended run. It was that the first however many games of 2023 before Milano had the leg injury in London. So like 4 games. And boy, it was exciting. And of course, he came back late in the season last year, but it's hard to put much into that stretch of time in terms of what that pair looks like. Although I thought Matt Milano got incrementally better as the season moved along, as he last few regular season games into the postseason. So if we get to see an entire year of those guys playing next to each other, that's a pretty exciting playmaking pair of linebackers. So I think we've seen some high-level stuff from Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano, but can we see it for an extended period of time next to each other and what that means for that duo playing off of each other? It's pretty exciting to me. So that's a big pathway for how it gets better, is Milano and Bernard playing next to each other for a whole season. Then you have this developing depth. Dorian Williams, Joe Andreessen, Edifwan Ulofoshio. Andreessen and Ulofoshio entering their second seasons. And then Dorian Williams entering his third season. And I've said repeatedly that I think that Dorian Williams from 23 to 24 was the most improved player on the team. Where does that go this year? Does he get on the field? There's some variables here that'll be tricky for Dorian Williams to display his growth, but whether it's 3 linebacker sets or he does have to play for an injury to Bernard or Milano, that's the opportunity that we'll have to see see where he's at in his game. And then, if he's going to be the successor to Matt Milano. The other layer to the Shaq Thompson conversation, as we consider the pathways to improvement at linebacker, is Shaq Thompson's a player that can play both positions. I talked about this, the Mike and the Will. And the reality is, I think we're all excited about Dorian Williams, but we haven't seen him play the Mike linebacker spot. And maybe that's just not where he's optimized. The good news is that if your linebacker 3 is Dorian Williams, you're not having to force him into that spot. If Shaq Thompson's around, he can step in there where Balin Spector's been first off the bench for Terrell Bernard. So player development, healthy Milano, the arrival of Shaq Thompson, and then what playing next to Matt Milano for an entire season can mean for Terrell Bernard. And then, of course, if the front's better, that's going to mean everything for the linebackers. Hopefully it is. Let's get to cornerback. Returning players, Christian Benford, Taron Johnson, and Jamarcus Ingram. That's it. Gone, Rasul Douglas, who does not have a team yet. Kyer Elam, who the Bills traded to the Dallas Cowboys. Some good momentum for Kyer Elam based on some of the reports coming out of their OTAs. And look, I've said repeatedly, I would not be surprised if Kyer Elam winds up being a good player for the Dallas Cowboys. I think he needed to get away from Buffalo for that to happen. I don't think it was going to happen in Buffalo. Your new players here, Maxwell Hairston, your first-round pick. Dorian Strong, day 3 pick. Tre'Davious White, welcome back. Dane Jackson, welcome back. So a lot of turnover here at the cornerback position. Also interesting that Rasul Douglas, another unsigned player. You look at so many of the unrestricted free agents that other teams in the league could sign from the Bills last year, and they just haven't. Mari Cooper, Rasul Douglas, Austin Johnson, Jordan Phillips, Quentin Jefferson, Von Miller. Nobody's signing these guys. Is this group better? Boy, it should be, right? It absolutely should be. Minus Rasul Douglas and Kyer Elam, plus a first-round pick, a day 3 pick, Trey White and Dane Jackson. That should be a better group. And mostly because we saw the age on Rasul Douglas last year. You always knew that was a guy that even in his prime, right, when he's coming out of college, the athleticism wasn't his game. And when it goes, it goes. Still a good tackler. Can still play in zone, but you ask this guy to turn and run, doesn't have the juice to do it. So your pathways to being better, although I do think that the personnel is better, well, it's Maxwell Hairston and the ceiling there, right? First round pick, all the athleticism in the world, playmaker's mindset, good ball skills, versatile. That's your number one path to improvement at corner. It's that guy. Then you have Trey White and Dane Jackson as vets in the room, which I think everybody benefits from them being around. I don't know how much either is going to play, but I think they can have an impact on the team, whether they're on the field or not. How about Christian Benford's trajectory? I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. He's been every bit of a top 5 corner in the NFL over the last 2 seasons. I really don't think that's debatable. Arrow is pointing up for that guy. How about Jamarcus Ingram's trajectory? Practice squad to carving out a bit of a role as a versatile defensive back. I've said a few times with him that I think he's probably the Bills' best special teams player in terms of covering kicks and punts. Dude's been able to carve out a role for himself in the NFL as a UDFA that played for 3 different colleges. And I think for Taron Johnson in the slot, there's more stability with him right now in terms of what's around him. And I think just based on the way the Bills play defense, with him in such a challenging role to be a second-level defender against the run and having to fit the run, but also the Bills will leverage their defense to funnel targets towards Taron Johnson. And I didn't think they had a good infrastructure around him last year with all the moving parts at safety and linebacker and Rasul Douglas's decline, not enough pass rush. That's going to make life difficult on a Taron Johnson. Hopefully that stuff's better this year. It should be better this year where you'll get a better version of Taron Johnson. So plenty of pathways for this Bills team to be better at the cornerback position. All right, coming up on the other side of it, we're going to talk safety, we're going to talk specialists, and we're going to tie a ribbon on this conversation. So, folks, be sure to stick with me. All right, welcome back. Let's talk safety. Let's talk specialist before we close today. At safety, another position without a lot of departing players. None, really. It's Taylor Rapp, Damar Hamlin, Cole Bishop, Cam Lewis. They're all back. Nobody's gone. You've added Derek Forrest, free agent from Washington, and a draft pick in Jordan Hancock. I struggled with where to put Cam Lewis and Jordan Hancock if they were corners or safeties. I think they're both. So I don't think there's a wrong answer, but I think they're kind of this hybrid slot safety type player. Is this better? Yes, it's better. It's the same players plus Derek Forrest and Jordan Hancock. Of course it's better. Outside of the assumption that those players actually improve what's going on, the pathways for it to improve is rooted, number one, in Cole Bishop's development. Did an article for the Herd Mentality Substack last week on Cole Bishop in 2025 expectations, and I think he's coming in with a much better opportunity now that he's got a year under his belt. He's still going to have to earn the job, right? I mean, ultimately, Damar Hamlin's been the starter 2 of the last 3 years. So he'll have to earn that job, but second-round pick, athleticism, the messaging from the coaching staff about Cole Bishop right now, it all feels really good. But his development and the physical upside that he has is really critical for this safety group taking a step. And, you know, Cole Bishop going from your safety 3 to your starter with development, that also improves your depth because now Damar Hamlin as a, you know, keep your head above water starter is a much better player as a depth player for you. So if Cole Bishop takes the step and is a starter and that bumps Damar Hamlin to a reserve role, you can see how that makes the group overall better. You do have your new arrivals in Forrest and Hancock. Not exactly sure what type of role either is going to fill. I'm not exactly sure if Derek Forrest is going to make this team, but I like the skill set for Forrest. I like what he showed in Washington. I liked him at Cincinnati in college. I'm very curious there. And Jordan Hancock, I hope that he's able to eventually win that dime role. You know, the Bills play this 6 DB defense more and more. They'll do it in a couple of different ways. One that where they'll rush, you know, they'll have 2 backers, one where they'll have 1, but if they have 2 backers, they'll go 3 down linemen. They've had some versatile ways that they get to it. But they bring in that 6th defensive back. Last year it was Cam Lewis. Can you get younger, bigger, and more athletic with Jordan Hancock eventually taking that over? I think you can. Be cool to me. And then we'll see about Taylor Rapp, his 3rd season with the team. It went from the 3rd safety to a starter. And, you know, with the Poyer-Hyde transition, Taylor Rapp was really looked to as kind of the guy at safety. I think he still is viewed that way. I think the team thinks very highly of Taylor Rapp. And, you know, he ought to be quite comfortable now with the system, developing chemistry with whoever his running mate's going to be. I assume that's going to be Bishop. But curious to see where that goes. I know there's a lot of high remarks regarding Taylor Rapp. Lastly, on the specialists, you bring back Tyler Bass, the kicker, Reed Ferguson, the long snapper. You say goodbye to Sam Martin. Sam Martin signed a 1-year, $1.5 million deal with the Carolina Panthers. Your new arrivals in terms of specialists, Jake Camarda and Brad Robbins, a couple of guys that are going to compete to be the starting punter with Sam Martin gone. Is this group better? I would say probably not. And Sam Martin, in terms of EPA, was one of the worst punters in the league last year. I still think he's a sufficient NFL punter. I don't know if either Jake Camarda or Brad Robbins are sufficient level NFL punters. What I can tell you is that they're young players that were drafted that their teams moved on from pretty quickly. Now, the good news is that happens a lot with kickers and punters, and eventually they settle in and they have long careers doing a great job for some team. It happens. But as of now, both are players, you know, Camarda, a 4th-round pick, Robbins, a 6th-round pick, that served at least 1 year with their team as the guy for them at punter. And both the Bengals and the Bucs said, we're going to go some other direction. So let's hope it comes together. Your other path to improvement here is, Tyler Bass. Haven't had conversations about Tyler Bass this offseason like we did last year, but that was a big point of panic for a lot of people. And I think until he hit the 60-something yard game winner against Miami, there was a lot of concern over Tyler Bass, and that felt like a turning point, but not just in that season for him, but maybe even in his career. Can he start the year and play all year like he finished last year? I think it's possible. And that'd be pretty exciting. So when you consider this defensive equation and how much better it is, I mean, you can look pretty much at every position and feel like it's improved, whether it's been additions, whether it's the same players coming back with some additions, plenty of upgrades, not to mention the coaching infusion with Ryan Nielsen, Mike Pellegrino, and Jason Raprovich. That's a notable amount of coaching talent added to this defense. But I can't help but continue to think about the players that the Bills moved on from, expiring contracts that they didn't re-sign, and all of these guys that are dangling out there. Rasul Douglas, Amari Cooper, Von Miller, Austin Johnson, Quentin Jefferson, Jordan Phillips. Teams were not lining up for these players. When you think about guys that signed deals that the Bills moved on from, it's Mac Hollins, 30-something-year-old receiver, 2 years, $8.4 million. DeJuan Smoot, minimum type deal to go back to Jacksonville. Sam Martin, the punter. I mean, there just hasn't been a lot of Bills. Quentin Morris got a minimum deal from Jacksonville. So a lot of reason to believe that you look at the departing players and the arriving players and feel like the Bills are a lot better, and they need to be on defense. We've talked a lot about the shortcomings on third down and passing defense last year, and feels like the ingredients are in place for this to improve. All right, folks, this has been fun. A little 2-day series setting the tone for the summer ahead of us here as we consider both sides of the ball and if the Bills are better. All right, folks, plenty more to get to the rest of the week. We'll have herd mentality and a whole lot more. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you are subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.